everybody, Fintan here from Damson Cloud. I'm here today with Sinead and Adrian, two of our customers. We're going to be talking about Google Workspace in a hybrid working environment. We've all worked remotely, we've all worked in an office, and now we're moving to a hybrid environment. I just want to do a quick introduction. Sinead is the founder and executive chair of Fenero, an award-winning contract solutions company based in Dublin, or potentially anywhere, who knows. Sinead started the business in 2009, an organisation that's grown from one employee herself up to over 40 staff now. And Sinead is a huge advocate of employee well-being and has actually won several awards herself, including being shortlisted several times for CEO of the Year. Congratulations. And congrats on the recent win of the Irish CX Impact Award, which is customer experience. I know it's a huge thing for you guys.
Yeah, thanks a million, Fintan. And yeah, customer experience is just absolutely at the heart of everything we do. So brilliant to get that recognition. Delighted with
Excellent. And Adrian is the head of IT for Foroige, one of Ireland's leading youth organisations, an incredible organisation that has engaged with 50,000 young people, has 5,500 volunteers, and is an amazing force for good in Irish communities. Adrian's championed a cloud-first strategy at Foroige, and has enabled online registration systems that have increased youth engagement, and also cloud solutions that have saved the organisation tens of thousands of euro, as well as allowing teams to work remotely over the last 2 years as well. So thanks very much for joining me today, guys. I really appreciate your time.
Delighted to be here.
So we might just briefly start with how you guys sort of started your journey with Google Workspace. I know, Adrian, for you and for Sinead, it was 10 years ago. How did that kind of journey start for Foroige?
I'm in a very lucky position to be the IT manager of a non-profit in Ireland. And if you look at the sector generally, it's very unusual to have an in-house IT manager, and that's was brought in on an expectation of modernising the IT, but also democratising the IT. So, when I joined Foroige, the systems were available within head office and not available to the majority of staff who were outside of the office. Right. So looking at that and looking at that disparity was one of the key things I had to address. I also had to modernise the systems anyway because they were quite behind in the times. And we were looking at email as particularly critical system that just wasn't working for them, and at that time Google's offering just made so much sense to us in terms of that. We also had to get an intranet going, and then we had Google Sites as well. So
yeah, I know Google Sites was a huge part
absolutely.
Of your decision, and I remember that actually being the launch. And I know you guys use Google Drive now and a lot more of the product, and we'll talk about that later. But that's interesting that like Google Sites 10 years ago, I mean, it's come such a long way. I know you're in the middle of a transition to the new Google Sites. Yep. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the intranet solution that you guys built.
So, part of the underlying problem for staff was, and it's funny to reflect on this, that the staff in remote working didn't feel connected to the larger organisation. So if they're working in a two-man office in Castle Island, the idea of the head office became this scary entity sitting up in Dublin, lording over them altogether, which wasn't the case at all. And all the staff in head office wanted to do was to help and support all staff throughout the country, but there was absolutely a disconnect. And one of the things was that they didn't have access to any resources. In fact, they had nothing from a technology point of view that helped them identify it as being part of Foroige, except this really poor email experience that they had. So one of the things that was clearly identified was, an intranet would be good, and be a good way to bridge that gap in some way. I remember being at a staff conference in Maynooth, where we brought staff in and we explained what we were going to do with the internet. And at that point, they'd already got access to Google email, and they were sitting somewhat jaded, looking at us going, when's this thing coming? When's this thing going to be available to us? And we were like, right now, you have it right now. Open up your computers, log in,
wow.
It's there. And they couldn't believe that they were actually talking about the solution to their problems and actually delivering it immediately to them. Now, an awful lot of work went into getting it to that point.
I remember.
But, it was great fun. It was a really interesting way to do it. But that was the start of really them getting a better experience, better connection to the organisation, better tools to do what they need to do. And it's built from there and there.
Excellent. And I know, Sinead, for you guys it was different. There was obviously only yourself and Dave and maybe one other employee in the business. How did your kind of cloud journey and Google Workspace journey start?
Yeah, it's really funny to look back over the journey that we have been on over the last 12 years now, really. But we've the company has changed massively over that time, and we started right from the very beginning with Google. So I suppose in the early days we're a very small business, just looking to find a tool that gave us loads of features and functionality that we could build the business on, and for good price point for what we needed back then as well. And
cost is always important for small businesses.
Absolutely,
I know that.
Absolutely. And I suppose we were always very kind of focused on the idea of cloud as well. We were looking at on the accountancy software solutions. We were one of the early, I suppose, adopters of Xero, and we're always looking at other kind of cloud-based packages in general, because we felt that's very much the way forward. So. But yeah, really over that time, we've just really feel like we've got, the company's grown substantially, and we've continued to use Google throughout that and in different ways. And it's really interesting to see how the business, how we use it, I suppose, how that's evolved as we've grown as a business as well. So it really gave us a really solid foundation for growing the business and helping us, be flexible in how we did that.
Yeah, and I think the flexibility is key. Okay, so we might kind of move now into the pandemic and how that affected both your organizations. And again, I know it's very different because of the difference in the organization, but I think that's kind of interesting for people to kind of see that contrast. Maybe starting with yourself, Adrian, how did it happen? How did you find out? And how did your staff respond?
Yeah, we found out the same way everybody else did, which is all of a sudden, I think everybody's mobile phones started exploding, going, okay, we really need to move now on this. So very short notice, same as everybody else. But, for our transition to the essentially working from home, transitioning the entire organization to doing that, it really was very seamless. There was about 10% of staff whose functions meant that they needed systems that were only available within the office. Thankfully, all of our staff were using laptops except that 10%. So we had to, for example, spin up laptops for that 10% and so on, and then figure out VPNs and so on and all sort of remote working solutions. But really, Google was the backbone, the example of, well, this works fundamentally no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter your circumstances, you will have access to that, which was, your email, your files, the intranet, these Meet and Hangout, and all of those things will work fundamentally no matter where you are. And it kept the business going. And it has become really obvious to everybody involved that it's been the key linchpin of the whole strategy, that we could just transition in a very painless way to remote working, and it's just enabled the business to keep going no matter what. It really has been fantastic.
It's great. And what about yourself, Sinead? How did the transition go for your team of sort of 40 or 50 people?
Yeah, I suppose similar in a lot of ways there, that I think the fact that we were using so much of Google, so much of the business kind of operated on that I consider that as a real strong head start that we had. We've been developing all our own bespoke IT systems for other areas of the business as well. So we have 4 developers. The
paper-based part.
We have 4 developers working full time on that. So we needed to accelerate. We were at this sort of end stages of some transformation projects. They weren't quite there, so we just had, it was all hands on deck, get that over the line, get that deployed, and really then that enabled us to tie up all the loose ends. That meant that nobody had to be in the work. We're an essential service business as well, in the space that we're at, but we did, for the health and safety of the employees, it was fantastic to not be having to negotiate, trying to bring people in. So yeah, Google gave us a massive head start there with all of that side of thing. I think our biggest challenge was probably communications, and everyone, as well as everyone adjusting personally, of course, to the challenges at home. But how would we communicate with each other? And we really,
constantly,
Yeah, we really then adopted chat, and by looking at our phone systems as well, we had to look at what changes we needed to make to facilitate,
telephony and stuff like that as well.
Sure. So they were the main challenges for us that we had to work through.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned chat. That was going to be my next question. What were the kind of core tools within Google that supported you guys? And I know, looking at the stats, as we were discussing earlier, hopefully it's okay to say there's 55,000 chat messages sent in a 30-day period in Fenero. So that's quite a lot for 40 or 50 people. That's impressive.
We're a very chatty bunch.
Yeah, very chatty bunch.
It's good to talk.
Yeah, and 500 active Google chat rooms, which is 10 times the number of employees. So a lot of different conversations going on with different people. So obviously chat is quite a core product that you guys leaned on, and I know from our discussions it wasn't really used that much before.
Wasn't really used that much before. I mean, we'd use it very sporadically, more to just, especially we'd just literally grown to the second floor of our building before the pandemic stuck in. So you started to use chat a bit more because you couldn't, you
didn't want to go
you're a little bit further away from people. But this, I mean, and there was not everyone in the company used chat, so we really had to think about. We had this fantastic facility set up. Every team set up their own group chat so they could talk within teams. We had different chats set up for different projects. And that became really a massive transformation in terms of how we stayed in contact. I suppose our business is very, it's just operationally we have to be in regular contact with each other because we have
deadlines and
multiple daily deadlines that we're processing a lot of data and
payroll and things like that.
You really have to be in communication all the time with each other. So chat just worked perfectly, really well for us, and that made a massive difference. Yeah.
Interesting. And what about yourselves, Adrian? I know, again, from looking at the stats for you guys, like obviously huge usage of Google Drive. I know that's 6 terabytes of data. But also you guys are heavy users of Google Meet. You've got 10,000 video calls already happened this year.
Absolutely. I mean, so we were talking off camera about the transition of the way we meet with our staff and the way we meet internally and even externally as well. All these meetings that we felt couldn't be done any other way, or the best in class solution we would have would be to meet somebody in person. And there's certainly value in meeting somebody in person, but you don't have to do it all the time.
We're here now.
We're here now, exactly. And this is worth it. But it's amazing what can happen when you have no other choice. And
you have to.
When you have to, and that's so much change was forced upon businesses throughout Ireland and organisations throughout Ireland, and that's something that just really worked. It really, really worked, and I don't think we'll ever go back to conducting the in-person meetings the way we did before. That's not to devalue them, but a valuable thing is only done when it's needed. And we've changed the organisation overnight in terms of that.
I think that, personally, I think that in-person meetings will be different. They'll be for different things now. They'll be for team building. They'll be for, something that would be more difficult to do remotely like this. I think they'll be for making decisions. They won't be for just having a catch up on something, because you can do that over video call.
We've even specifically gone through that process of defining when will we have an in-person meeting and when will we have virtual meetings, because we are going forward with this hybrid model. But it's just to think consciously about what are we doing, when do we. There's great benefits of being in a meeting in person, but you need that consistency throughout the organisation, that everyone's on the same page as well. That you don't have some individuals. They just prefer to have everyone in, so you call an in-person meeting and other people don't. So we've gone through that process of trying to really think about it, but there'll be a certain amount of
teething,
just to see what works and what doesn't work, and keep being conscious though about what are we doing, why are we choosing to do things in certain ways. And look, we're all going through a new experience, so we'll
I think that's right.
Learn as we go.
Yeah, it's keeping an open mind, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is interesting though, like, because obviously the hybrid work is the next thing we're going to talk about. For you guys, I'm interested to know, was Google Meet used, or was video conferencing used in both businesses previously a lot, or like a little bit, or
I would say more the latter. Again, I think what Meet has broken down and what the pandemic has broken down is the silos of work. So you tended to work most closely with the people that you're in the same office with. And certainly we miss that closeness of those guys that you work with. I'm lucky to work with a very nice bunch of people. I do miss the collegiality of being in the office with them, and the banter and the fun and people dropping into the office and all that. But it has broadened my working group, because now I'm involved with various different groups that have no physical connection with each other, and there's the work has been done really well. We've tried to replicate actually the office infrequent chat as much as possible. The worst thing you can say about it is it has to be scheduled, so it's not it's scheduled fun, but we have a coffee morning. In fact, I think there's one next week with the staff that work with me in the Park West office, and they're always good fun, and we've had to adjust to how that works and what works and doesn't work online, but they are fun and they are worth doing. So it's shown that there is a way to keep that fun and banter and collegiality there, even if you're not physically in the same space. So it's been a really interesting process from that point of view. But it is, I think Meet and other online conferencing tools like that are going to be, and chat as well, are just fundamentally part of the organisation going forward. It's never going to go back from here.
Away,
No, absolutely.
What about yourself, Sinead? Did you guys use video conferencing before at all?
Rarely, because we were a very traditional, I suppose, business. And
when you were calling us, maybe.
Yeah, it was actually, it's more outside companies that we worked with, and we've always kind of worked with, I suppose, it's because we work with contractors, I suppose, than people that would work for our business. I don't know, we have freelancers or different businesses, so talking to yourselves or other people I would have worked with in the UK or just different parts of Ireland, but internally within the business, no, because we're all located together. So we just didn't use that at all.
So how did that explode when sort of, the pandemic hit? Obviously, you know, people are in different locations. Were people sort of using primarily chat or video conferencing or a mix? Or?
So again, we had to really think a little bit about what are we, and that process isn't finished, but we had to think about what are we using when. But certainly we've always highly valued our sense of one team. It's one of our big company values. And so whilst chat has been so effective for just the day-to-day and getting things done, we want to spend that, you want to have that face time. We want to continue having the team meetings and the virtual coffees and all of those things. So it's seeing people's faces. It's obviously really important. So we've definitely used that hugely, like probably everybody else. It's become a part of the day to day.
I think it has, yeah. And I don't think you couldn't find somebody in the world who hasn't been on a Microsoft Teams or a Google Meet or a Zoom call over the last 12 months or 18 months. It would be literally impossible. So I next is kind of Google Drive. I'm sort of interested around, and again, I've spoken to both of you, and interestingly, both organizations use Drive and Docs in kind of different ways. As we mentioned earlier, Google Sites is heavily used, and the documents are sort of linked to that. With you guys, it's a little bit different, but I just kind of want to talk about the contrast with that. So, with Fenero, again, you guys have quite a lot of data. You've got a terabyte of data in there. But I know Google Sheets is kind of a core, tool that you guys have leaned on quite heavily. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, particularly as a finance organization. We often find it difficult to get finance people to use Sheets. So how has that helped you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the very early stages shifting from Excel to Google Sheets. Now we still, some areas of the business would still use Excel for certain parts, but we do heavily use Google Sheets for an awful lot of things. And for me, even personally, looking at our own management accounts and all of those things, I would personally always now go for Google Sheets rather than Excel. And that's as an sort of just putting my accountant kind of finance hat on there. But in terms of how we run the business, we use Google Sheets for tracking a lot of processes, for groups of people to collaborate together, obviously, but they would be quite a core part of tracking various processes that multiple people can go in each stage. I've done my part. So that's one way that we've used Google Sheets, as well as kind of the, I suppose the
standard
spreadsheet, the P&Ls or adding numbers.
And was that pre-pandemic or post or?
We've always done that.
Always done it that way.
Yeah,
Did you find an increase in usage or any sort of changes when the pandemic hit, or you guys were already kind of using it?
Because that's actually a core part of how we operate.
So we've talked about working remotely, how your businesses and organizations sort of responded to the pandemic. We're obviously all moving back now into meeting in person, as we're doing now, socially distanced and being safe. Have you guys spoken to staff anecdotally or through surveys? What is the kind of word on the ground from people? Do they want to go back to the office? Do they not? Maybe start with you, Adrian.
I think there's a huge desire to take the benefits of working from home and working remotely into this next phase, once the restrictions are removed. We have some staff that will be challenging for, because they're paid to work in a community with young people, for example. How can that work in a remote situation? That definitely requires a conversation with the funders in that case. And I can't imagine a consistent answer coming back from the funders. But for other staff in finance and HR and so on, staff that I would have viewed as being very reticent to try a model of working from home, they're anecdotally coming back to us and saying we will never go back into the office full time. It'll never go back to the way it was. And even I think the overall drive of the organisation is there is no reason that we would do that as long as we're facilitated to enable remote working, that will be a part of our working going forward. So, the world has changed and it is not changing back. So this is a brave new world for us.
You made an interesting comment earlier on that your office in Park West was nearly at capacity.
Absolutely.
And now...
and it was the problem that didn't have a solution. Did you look at taking more space, but that was expensive. We are a non-profit. That's not what you want. Do you look at purchasing a building? That's expensive again. Do you look at actually moving out of Dublin? Moving this office out of Dublin. All these challenges, and it's just not a problem going forward. I just don't see. Anecdotally, I don't see the head office, the main office in Park West, main office is the largest amount of staff, ever going back to full time.
Full capacity.
It just won't, and it just makes sense for everybody to have some sort of blended model going forward. And the challenge for the organisation is to keep the productivity going, keep the collegiality going, as I mentioned before, and to keep that identity as being part of the team.
The serendipity.
The serendipity and the good vibes, the good feeling of being part of that team, even when you're not physically there. But these are challenges the organisation is very much up for. So it's an amazing change.
An amazing problem to have.
Yeah.
And what about yourselves, Sinead? Have you guys had conversations about hybrid working over the last kind of 6 months, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been quite, I suppose, conscious about what we're doing here, and we have made the decision to move permanently to hybrid and to not go back to where we were. And I suppose we've put some structures around that in terms of working arrangement options. So everybody has the option to be office based, remote working, or flex, and there's some guidance within that. But in terms of talking to the team, it was very clear that a lot of people wanted that option to continue remote working. Sure. We'd love to offer it as an employer, and just think it really ties in with, I suppose, well-being, work-life balance, just so many great benefits of it.
Which I know is something you're a huge advocate of as well, employee well-being. So yeah, it ties in with your kind of company culture.
Absolutely, yeah. When you can make it work operationally, and then it's looking at, as Adrian was saying about the team, the culture, making sure we maintain all of that. But yeah, we absolutely been talking with the team, and last month we did a survey, and it came back 56% of the team want to opt for our remote working arrangement. Now, everyone remote working will still come into the office 2 days a month, because we do very much value the in-person side. We want to do team buildings. We'll be very conscious about why are people coming into the office on those days. You won't be coming in just to do the same thing that you've been doing at home, just to be a little bit social and see people. There'll be specific kind of purposes for coming in.
It'll be deliberate, really.
Yes, so we've been very conscious about why are we bringing people together, and there is great value in bringing people together, but let's make sure we're capitalising on that. If people are going to travel, and if we are going to do those things, then there's only 8% of people who want to be office-based permanently. And for us, office-based we define as 4 to 5 days a week, so it's not necessarily even the 5 days, full days. So, and then 36% want to go for some form of flex.
So you've got like 90% basically either want remote or hybrid. Which is interesting. And your hybrid is what, 2 days in the office?
It can be, again, it's flexible. So we've, in terms of the consultation, we wanted to get everyone's feedback in terms of what do you want, and then we'd say, is there any, if it very much swayed in one direction or another, we felt we couldn't facilitate it. But no, we're trying to be as flexible as we can. So the hybrid isn't, say, if you're hybrid, you're 2 days or 3 days, you still have that choice. It could be between 1 to 3 days in the office. So there's a lot of logistical kind of work around that, but I suppose we want to embrace it, and we want to work. It's not going to be straightforward. We're not going to get it right immediately.
No, we're all learning, and it's new for everybody.
And everyone in the company is bought into that, and but we want to embrace it, and we know we'll be on a journey with it. So.
And how have you guys sort of gathered information from staff and employees? Has it been through surveys or?
Surveys, yeah. Google Forms used as well.
Loads of questions there.
Yeah, look, obviously loads of conversation, but then we wanted to get the actual, ask the uniform questions as well, and get the stats to see. So, a mixture, but certainly like last month we ran a survey just to get the specific data and information from everyone that way as well.
Cool. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about how you guys are using Google Drive and how that will sort of support, again, the sort of hybrid and remote working models. I know it's used very heavily within both businesses. You guys have started to use shared drives recently, which is a relatively new tool within Google. And, for people that don't know, basically allows you to have a sort of shared drive or server in the cloud. You guys have recently upgraded, so this is new to the Fenero team, but I know Foroige have been using it for some time. How is that used in the business? I think there's when I looked at them, maybe 50 or so shared drives.
I'm surprised there's only that many. So for each business unit, we have at least one for each business unit / cost center / youth work project that we have.
Apologies, 250. I was mistaken.
I really have to go back and slap some heads if that's all we had. So 250 sounds bad. Even 250 sounds low in comparison to what we should have, but it's still certain business units transitioning onto it. But that solves the problem of having a shared space, that team collaboration, having everyone understands where to put it. If everything's in my drive, then people get confused about where to put it and sharing folders between each other.
It's owned by Sinead, it's owned by Adrian, it's owned by Fintan. Who owns a document? At least with shared drives, it's centrally ownership. Absolutely,
and one big issue for us was a staff member leaves and all their files relating to the project are sitting in their My Drive, and what happens in that situation. So shared drives have been absolutely fundamental and brilliant for that purpose, and it really gives central control and central visibility for the team as well, primarily, but also control for ourselves. So it's been brilliant, but we've been leveraging all aspects of Drive for many, many years now. The collaboration within docs, within sheets, within slides, within forms. You've been using forms. I've been using forms with add-ons to get approval on Google Forms that come through.
So creating workflows with Google Forms.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. So it's shown up the weaknesses of other systems we have, that they didn't have the flexibility to, okay, we capture this information in this system, we want to capture that information now. And they're going, sorry, we can't. It's not flexible enough to do that. In Google, you just spin up a new form, put on the workflow add-on, and off you go. So Google, if anything has defined Google, is that speed of being able to iterate out a new form or add a new process. The innovation and just bringing processes into that is so simple in comparison to any other system that we could list off. So it's been brilliant.
And what about you guys, Sinead? I know Sheets is used heavily. Is kind of Google Drive and Docs and stuff the primary tool people, where they kind of put stuff? Or I know shared drives is new to you guys. You're kind of moving to it at the moment, but
yeah, and I think it's great to I suppose because we have grown so much over the years, as the team are so much larger, and then the number of reasons that we would need to create sheets and docs for, it can get a bit not as organised. I was going to say chaotic. I was like leaning back from that. But,
sorry.
No, it's harder to stay organised and like you say, where is that doc now? Or or someone needs to give someone else new access. You have to wait the delay for the owner to grant the. So it's all those little things, but they're obviously very overcomable, and we're going through that now.
I think for you guys, you came from, and this often happens, and I had the discussions with Richard and your team. You guys upgraded to the next version because you sort of hit the limitations basically of the version that you were on. Luckily, Adrian's guys are on non-profit, so they get that for free, which is useful. But maybe around Google Docs in general, kind of collaborative stuff. Have you found that more valuable with the hybrid working model?
Very much. Like, we've used it before, but I suppose I'm trying to lean on that even more now. And I think the whole thing, again, we're looking very much, how do you make remote and hybrid working effectively? And I suppose that whole asynchronous communication side of things is so...
Synchronous, asynchronous,
Yeah, it's so topical, and I wouldn't even have really known that word, It wasn't something particularly on my radar before, but you look at the companies who've been doing this for years and it's such a high... they talk about the massive importance of that. So we've... purposely even more so leaned into kind of Google Docs and a few things to say, let's just get 10 people on here and let's share ideas and let's spitball through the Google Doc before we have the Zoom call meeting. Whereas before maybe we would have spitballed in person, and you don't want to be doing that on Zooms because there's this balance of
Zoom
video.
Zoom fatigue or Google Meet or Teams or whatever it is, fatigue. And I think that's definitely a thing. You're exhausted. I found myself sometimes just jumping from call to call to call. At the end of the day, I'm just like wrecked. So I think that prep is fantastic. Like, let's get it down the doc. Let's all have digested it, and then the meeting is for a decision. Not for you know.
And it's better for individuals who might be quieter or shyer as well, because they may not, they had the opportunity to contribute before in a group setting. But there's still you still have to be very conscious about it. At the end of the day, it's still a big, I find anyway, it's a cultural shift. And it's a new way of working that we all have to do this instead of always just relying on the fact we could stick our heads around into, someone's desk and chat. We have to consciously say, look, it might have been easier that way, but we need to look at how we're moving forward. And certainly, the Google Docs is fantastic for that.
Yeah, and chat. I mean, now you guys, as we were saying earlier, are heavy users of chat. I don't know if I said the stat, 55,000 messages sent a month by the Fenero team.
There is work happening.
There is definitely work happening. Well, I mean, that's it. We talked about the productivity. Every manager in the country was terrified of that. But I mean, you look at the number of documents created, the number of Google Meets going on in Foroige, 10,000 Google Meets have happened since the start of the year. The number of messages have been sent, obviously there's some banter and chat going on too, but there's work happening, do you know what I mean? And it's impossible for people not to see that, so I think those, as you were saying, we had sort of gathered some of the stats for this. It's interesting to see, the stats and things like that. And I think it's interesting to see how those technologies will supported you guys now, but also going forward. I think for me, what's an interesting discussion is I'd mentioned at the start, we've all worked remotely. We've all worked in an office. Now we're moving to this hybrid, and I'm interested in in general, you guys' opinions of how we will kind of bridge that gap with technology, maybe Google, maybe other tools. That what happens if we're all on a team? There's 10 of us, and 5 of us are in the office now, and 5 of us aren't. How do we kind of bridge that gap? Is it chat? Is it meet? Is it a mixture of all three? Is it documenting things like you said? I don't know who wants to jump in on that, but I think it's an interesting challenge that we're going to have to look at,
I think it takes that examining of what is gained and what's lost and what works well and what doesn't, and it takes a lot of reflection in terms of that, and checking in with staff to see what's there. That challenge, one of the basic challenges Foroige's had is that we've taken on 30 or 40 staff since the pandemic started, right, at least. Yeah. And how do you integrate them into the team? It's an example of something that's been forced on us, but going forward, do we expect something to be a legacy of the COVID era? I'd say absolutely. Even interviewing has changed. It was always seen that all interviews carried out in person, and that's just not the case anymore. No. Will certain parts of that be continuing on? Absolutely sure it will.
The first phase of interviews maybe is remote, and
absolutely.
Then you have the other ones in person.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have to make sure that we still have a good experience, good productivity, good collegiality, and it is a challenge going forward, but the tools are there, and I can even see the Google tools adopting to address some of those issues in terms of ensuring people have a good experience of it.
Yeah.
Things like noise cancellation and so on, things that wouldn't have been top of anybody's radar 2 years ago.
The dog barking in the background or the kids screaming wouldn't have been a thing. Now it is.
Absolutely, and anything that has enhanced features on that also is a big thing. So it's going to be an evolution of the way we work. But it's going to be a very exciting journey. I'm very looking forward to it.
Definitely with the Lewis, we could do some noise cancellation.
Maybe so, yes.
I don't know if anyone's heard it in the background. It's interesting. There are some features that I kind of pulled out. Noise cancellation was one of them. There's another interesting one that launched last week that I thought was interesting. When you respond to a meeting now, you can actually say whether you're going to be remote, I don't know if you've seen this, or whether you're going to be in person, which I think is interesting because I've heard of a few anecdotal stories of people turning up to meetings that they thought were remote, or remote that they, and vice versa. So, they're the type of little things that are small, but actually could have a huge impact. Do you know what I mean?
I thought that was very interesting when you mentioned that one earlier, for sure.
Yeah, are we meeting? Is this a video call, or are we actually going somewhere?
I suppose you didn't have the option for the last while. So
well, that's true. Yeah, before you knew everything was remote. Now with the hybrid, it's and I had to check that with somebody recently. I was like, "Am I going to the place?" And they were like, "Oh yeah." And was that not obvious? And I was like, "No."
and actually, those mixed meetings where you've got a certain amount of people in person and a certain amount of people attending remotely is the most difficult thing to facilitate, and most difficult thing to have a quality experience on both sides. So that I can see the Google solutions, hardware, but also the general solutions evolving in that way. I think that's the next big challenge, is to, again, back to the democratization of the IT. It doesn't matter where you are, you will get a good experience of it.
And I think that's important. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier, that what happens if 2 or 3 of the team are remote and then 5 or 6 of us are actually just talking, and we're ignoring the video camera or the,
Again, I think it's about being really conscious about communication and connection, and really thinking about what are we doing and why are we doing it, and try to put those a certain amount of policies this is as well, and have a uniformity in the company. But I suppose for us, I mean, we're adopting that a remote first policy to meetings, that if it's, even if there's only one person based at home and everyone else is in the office, we're going to go with a video based meeting. So again, we'll have to see how everything pans out, but I suppose we've been very, very mindful of the some of companies talking about kind of inclusivity and what's the experience of people working remotely. Is there the chat happening in the room that you're not a part of, and does that exclude people? So for us, we're definitely going with I suppose it's virtual, and even the reconfiguration that we're doing of the office space at the moment is to look at how many people will be in the office. Will they have enough space to have private video calls when they need to? So those are all the logistical things, but it's about being really, I suppose, thinking those things through. And I suppose with the meetings as well, we've got a very low tech solution at the moment when we create the meetings, that they will have to specify in the meeting title, is it in person or virtual?
No, I mean,
it
doesn't matter how you do it. It's just it's having, as you said, a policy.
It's clear, and uniformity across the company, because it can fall apart very quickly. Everyone's going through this change process, and frustrations, I'd imagine, can build easily enough. It's one thing when we're all largely remote, but now as companies are shifting to more flexibility and more hybrid, we need to be as clear and as conscious about what we're doing and why we're doing it as we can.
I think you're absolutely right, definitely, and I think that is a difficulty. Do you know what I mean? With, like you said, what's the technology, what's the space, the configuration of the office? I think the office space is going to change. I mean, every business is going to go through, an organisation is going to go through that. And it's interesting you guys are sort of looking at the reconfiguration. We've seen a lot of customers sort of change what Google call a dark meeting room, i.e. one without video conferencing into one with video conferencing of whatever solution, so that if someone's in a meeting room, they don't have to be like, oh, I need to book the video conferencing meeting room. No, every meeting room needs to have the ability now for someone to join remotely. You can't have it that, as you say, that they can't, because you need to have enough spaces within your building that, now instead of one meeting room, you actually might need 4 or 5 or 10, because that's what's happening when people are in those spaces. It's not necessarily sitting at a desk.
And that's the big shift, even with the square footage issue. We have, we won't need as much space theoretically as we did, but we just need to use it in a different way. And when teams come in, we can reconfigure and have big team collaboration spaces, because that's the whole, as we say, when people come together, we're very clear on why they're coming together. It's not to continue doing what they would do at home. So you just need to use space in a different way. Yeah,
one of our customers, W2W Walls to Workstations, they build the interior of offices for like Google and Apple and these sort of companies, and they have been flat out the last kind of 6 months with basically people doing exactly that, just reconfiguring the spaces, soundproofing, that kind of stuff. I've seen a couple of those little booth things where you can kind of go in and sort of have 2 or 3 people on a call. I think they're going to become really popular. It's like a little office space within an office space almost, I think they're definitely going to become more popular. So maybe we might kind of finish up with, if you guys were talking to somebody who was beginning their Google journey now, and they were trying to figure out how to do remote working, how to do hybrid working, what would be your general / Google advice for them that you'd tell them to do? Obviously use a Google partner like Damson, but I mean, other than that.
The top tip.
I suppose for me, we're 10 years using the product, and if somebody was starting from scratch, I would say to them, have confidence that the Google solution is a very, very good, in fact, probably best in class, robust, reliable solution, and has been thought through, and if you use it to its potential, it will work for you in that scenario. It'll work very well, and don't underestimate that it is a change. That if you're used to working one way and all of a sudden you're going to start working in a completely different way, that is a painful process, and it can be. So don't underestimate people's reticence to embrace that change, or as soon as they have the option to default back into the old ways of working, that they might do that. You really have to advocate and educate and train and demonstrate and evangelize. I used that word earlier on, but definitely have to show them that this will work and commit to it. But it does, and I think it's just going to be a facet of people's lives going forward. The society has changed, you know.
Yeah, we always, change management is one, as you know, is one of the areas we advocate very heavily for, and it's something that in projects people don't take seriously enough, and it's the biggest part. It's bigger than the technical. It's the biggest percentage of a project is making sure you bring people along on that journey. If you don't, it's that old adage of you can bring the horse to water, but if you don't help them along in that journey, they're not going to use the new tools. They're just going to default back to whatever. And what about yourself, Sinead? What words of wisdom would you have for somebody starting out now?
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking about the journey that we've been on, and it has been a complete story of change. We've grown from 1 to 40, so and our whole business itself has changed substantially during that time in terms of how we do
you guys
things,
actually started out doing something different from what you do now, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we've gone much more specialised, but also just how we operationally deliver things, and everything's very, very different. But Google's worked with us throughout all of that, and we've continued to evolve. I think one thing I'd probably say, and jokes aside, obviously work with a great partner, but actually ask the questions, because often we'd be thinking we've got this challenge or we're not, and then you have a chat and you find out, oh, there's this feature that we didn't know about, or there's this new thing coming down. So Google, it's always evolving and changing. So actually probably a lot of the challenges that we've been experiencing, there is a good solution. And even talking to you guys, just looking at the internet and using Google Sites for that, that's our next thing we want to do as well. So you should definitely have a chat with Adrian before you go. So there's plenty to, I suppose, it's clearly all the basics. It is massively robust, and the security and the flexibility that it offers. But from our own personal experience, we've grown and changed substantially over the 10, 11 years that we've been using the platform, and it's been fantastic for us.
All right, guys, so thanks very much for joining us. I found this discussion really valuable and interesting. I think hybrid working is, as Sinead said, it's new to all of us, and I think it's something that we're all going to be dealing with over the next forever. So thanks very much for your time and your input.